So, we mentioned on our previous podcast, the Gramophone Awards review podcast, that Gil Rose of the Boston Modern Orchestra Project won the Special Achievement Award for Gramophone this year. And I was checking the lists at Presto Music in England, and they've chosen among their kind of like new release roundup recordings was the new Volume 3 of the Wranitzky series, who we talked to Daniel and Marek about. You know what I think? I think Gil Rose and the Wranitzky series got the adult music bump. You know? So they're winning these awards and things. That's, you know, we kind of gave them a little push there, and I think people are listening to us. I think they're noticing.
It could be.
Yeah.
I'd like to think we had a little influence in there.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I think I'm going to suggest that we did, just because I can.
At the very least,
because I have the platform to do so.
Yeah, we were on the cutting edge of what was going to be, you know, picked out among the hordes of releases. So if anyone, you know, if you want winning lottery numbers, your fortune, come to adult music. You know.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna give a shout out to Mike Ladon. He's gonna win a Jazz Grammy this year. That's my prediction.
That would be great
because he did the adult music review. So there you go. We will be 3 for 3 by the end of the year.
On the cutting edge.
On the cutting edge, yeah.
Of all mature music, right here.
Right.
On the Adult Music Podcast, where we give you music for the mature mind, and also tell you about great things to come.
Oh yeah. And there's a lot of great stuff this week.
We got some really good stuff this week. Yeah.
Yeah, this was an enjoyable listening week all the way through, pretty much.
Now I'm settled in here because, we're back in our evening slot, and I don't think we're going to have any motorcycles or other sounds, and it's dark out because it's getting dark early. And it's time.
At my house, we only get the motorcycle sounds at 3 a.m. I don't know why that is. I got to live on a mountainside, and I think people just go up the mountain at night. They go camping up there, and then you can hear like motorcycles going by really late at night. I'm kind of on the ground floor, so I can hear them really up close.
There's not too much here except for the tofu truck at 5 p.m. After that, it's pretty quiet. Yeah.
5 p.m.?
Yeah, that's when he comes around with his little
That's not a big deal.
Not a big deal. Nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so we had our midweek Gramophone Review Award, and that was, we put that as a regular episode 31. So this week...
In which everybody learned which albums I didn't hear.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't listen to all of them.
But I will be hearing them all eventually, so it's going to take a long time. Maybe that wasn't such a... I did want to talk about some of the records that I did hear on that podcast, but it turns out there were a lot of records, and I couldn't really get through them all.
There's too many.
So
Yeah.
There are too many, yeah.
So that makes this episode 32 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. And before we get rolling on this week's 6 new albums, I want to remind everyone that in the episode description, you're going to find links to Spotify and Apple Music for all the music we'll discuss. And also at the top of the description, there's a link to the full episode playlist. That's all the music in one place, one click. It'll bring you to Deezer, our preferred streaming platform, where you can also follow us at username Adult Music Podcast. The podcast is up there too, as well as the playlist for all of our episodes. If you can't see that easily, or the links don't work because on some platforms they only have the text, you can just jump over to our host platform, Podbean, where everything's easy to see and all the links are easy to follow. Also, if you enjoy the podcast, please do follow or subscribe on whatever app or platform you're listening to us on. And if you give us a ranking or write a review, that will help us get listed in the browsing category recommendations, of which we're back in the Podbean music commentary list, short list this week. So hopefully that'll turn some more eyes. We haven't been up there for a while. And when we get up there, that helps us increase the members of our audience. And we're always happy about that. Also, if you'd like to contact us directly, if you have any comments or questions, please don't hesitate. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, that's all one word, gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, you can see that on the Podbean site if you're not good at spelling.
That's right. By the way, can click there, yeah. And if you don't know us, this is Russ here, and over there...
I'm Mike.
Is Mike.
Yeah.
And we're both here in Japan.
With all the CDs.
At R&M
Drowning
Studios.
in CDs. I will definitely die one day reaching for a CD, and the shelf will fall on me, and I will be crushed to death under the weight of all the CDs I have.
Just make sure that you have a little note with the, notary
I'll pin a note to my lapel every time I reach for one. That Russ gets all the
Russ gets all of those, yeah.
all the CDs on my deceased.
Yeah. Most of them are on my hard drive, but I'll take the physical copies too, and then I'll just move all my wife's stuff out and put those in.
I think Japan, the Japanese authorities, if I were to give all these CDs to them, they could actually build a new airport on the surface area that they cover.
That's an interesting idea, how much surface area those would have, yeah.
I just read a piece this week that said that CDs last 20 years, which is a little depressing. But I don't know. I have CDs that are more than 20 years old. That's not right. Yeah, I don't know why they think that.
The first CD I ever bought when I finally had saved up enough for CD player. I think, when did CD players came out in 1981?
Maybe. I had mine in 85, but they were
They came out in 81, and of course, I was very young and didn't have enough money. I didn't get mine until 89, and I remember the first disc I bought, which was, it was a Clifford Brown CD, and I think the next one was Miles Davis. And after that, let's see, I'm trying to think. Anyway, those CDs still play as good as the day that they were made. I've never had a commercial CD fail. I've only had like CDR ones that I burnt myself where the layer peeled off. So
I've had one or two commercial ones kind of not work, but very rare.
I've had some bad ones.
There have only been 3 or 4. Yeah. No, but they worked. But then, like one day, I put them in and they didn't play anymore. But that's only 3 or 4 of the thousands that I have. I mean, it's really crazy.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, I'd hate to lose those. I do have digital files of a lot of them now, but not all of them by any means. Okay. Anyway, incidentally, we should mention that for those we're big fans of the Renitsky project now that we've talked to Daniel Bernardson and Marek Stilek on that interview that we did with them, and I would like to mention that Volume 3 of that series on the Naxos label is out as of Friday, October 8th. So you can get that now. We haven't heard it yet, actually, so maybe we'll talk about it a little bit.
Hope to listen to it this week. Yeah, Daniel sent me the scores. Yeah. They'll be up. It was fun to listen to Volume 2 with the scores, and although...
Oh, you had the scores. Yeah, can you send me the scores? I'll take a look at that this week as well.
At this. It's fun to follow the scores. It would be actually much easier to do if they were on paper. It's not really easy to follow like a whole orchestra score on a computer screen.
Especially if you have a laptop like I do. Boy.
And, but it was fun to do that, and I'll do that with the new one. And this time I will also refer to Daniel's album notes, which he reminded me of last time. Naxos is one of the nice labels that gives you the full album notes for free on their website.
Online.
Online. So you can check that out. Right. But we hope to get a listen and maybe talk about that soon on the podcast soon.
Unlike our least favorite record label, Sony Classical, who doesn't even put out stuff on CD. No. The distribution is just for them. It's just
they don't want you to listen to it.
They don't want me to listen to it. No, I'm gonna. You know what? We have a podcast here. We have a little bit of a platform. I'm gonna complain right now, about something. I've been wanting to hear the Roxana Ahmed album Ontology for some time. All right, it's not available. It's not available on any physical media. It's a Sony release. Okay, so it's not like she's on Bandcamp or anything like that. That's another issue altogether. But you can't. It's not on Deezer either. It's only on selected sort of streaming sites. It's on Spotify, but I don't want to listen to it on Spotify because I don't have a subscription, and they play ads in between the songs, and I don't want to hear the ads. It's just a nightmare. Put this out on a CD, Sony. I'll buy it. I'm interested. I'm a big collector. But I don't know. This drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's getting a little funny. There's all kinds of pockets of resistance.
Another release I want to talk about is on the award winning this year, the label of the year, Deutsche Grammophon. They recently released an album of Florence. It's Florence Price, right? She has two symphonies. We talked about her chamber music. She's an American composer from the mid 20th century, and we could hear these. They're on Deezer, but there's no physical medium for this. And Deutsche Grammophon will sometimes do this as well. They did this with the Dudamel Ives symphonies, which are now on CD. It took like months after they released it. And we talked in the last episode about the John Adams Must the Devil Have All the Best Tunes with Yu Wang. That was never released on a CD either. It's just available as streaming. So I'm a little. I want to program this Florence Price album, but I'm a little reluctant to do it just because I can't get a CD of it. I don't really want to, rely on the streaming to hear it. I might do that anyway because I think it's a major release. I mean, she's kind of a big new discovery, and she's kind of popular now. It's very appealing music to listen to. Anyway, we'll get to that eventually one day, I'm sure.
Must the record labels make listening so difficult?
I know.
That'd be a good
It used to be easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on, one platform. You'd put it on a CD. You'd go to Tower Records, it would be there. Yep.
Don't even want to go to Tower Records now. The used shop has more than they do. But
we do. The funny thing is, we actually have Tower Records still in Japan. There was like a buyer here, and they kind of kept it going with the same design, the yellow and red, and but they're all gone in America now. It's too bad. That was a golden age back in the 90s. I remember.
Back in the old days.
Back in the old days, we had these giant record stores. It was really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a great documentary about Tower Records, by the way. Made by Tom Hanks' son. I'm pretty sure it was him. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it was really good. Good interviews, people remembering the good old days of Tower Records in California where it started, and then its expansion across the U.S. and the world.
Yeah.
They overextended themselves. And anyway, now everybody listens to things online. I don't like that. I like still having the thing.
Because you're an old timer.
Maybe, but certain things you really appreciate when you get to your middle age. One of them is whiskey.
Yeah,
and another one is
stuff. I have a lot of stuff on CDs that you'll never find anywhere on streaming, or anywhere else, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I have a lot of stuff on CD that aren't going to be available on streaming, and that will eventually disappear from streaming too, but won't disappear from my record collection.
Yes.
I don't know. All right. Anyway, speaking of the label of the year, the Gramophone Awards winning label of the year, Deutsche Grammophon, we do have an excellent release from them. Well packaged, well thought out. This is Kit Armstrong on the piano. William Byrd, John Bull, the Visionaries of Piano Music on the Deutsche Grammophon label and on a CD as well. I'm very happy. A double CD, in fact. It's a very long album. All right, so Kit Armstrong, American pianist, and he has British and Taiwanese parents. So he's, I don't know how he wound up in America. But he was a child prodigy, and he's also a composer. He's one of these people who can just do everything, including play the piano. He's a pretty astonishing piano player. He's got an amazing technique, at least in this music. This particular program, it's pretty interesting. He's playing William Byrd and John Bull, two of the most famous virginal composers of their day. The virginal was an early harpsichord that was available in England, and he's playing them all on the piano. So it's a very unusual release, but a really fascinating one as well. He combines these two composers. He sort of juxtaposes them, and he claims in the Deutsche Grammophon booklet note that between the two of them, they started the entire trajectory of piano music up to the present day. I think that's a bit of that's quite a claim.
That's a stretch.
But he even has a chart in the textbook showing who these composers influenced, and it's he makes a pretty good case for it. I don't know that I'm going to agree with that, but anyway, that's his sort of take on this, and he's actually putting together this whole recording project that we're hearing on this album to back it up. So I'm impressed by that. His entire project against my word. I think he wins. But anyway,
I guess normally we think of the precursor to piano as the harpsichord,
right.
and that's about it. But here we've got like virginal music, which is sort
it's
of
like a harp. Virginal is pretty much a harpsichord.
Yeah, pretty much.
They're similar.
But I guess if you think of the idea of a keyboard, being laid in front of you with all these keys, that's a different approach to playing music from all the stringed instruments that you would, hold and fret or pluck too, or blow into. So, in that sense, going back, I don't know how much earlier you can go back when there was an actual, keyboard type of layout like that, that would be a precursor, the earliest precursor in concept of the techniques and possibilities. And in that sense, the visionaries of piano music would emerge from that time. I guess I can understand the idea.
Yeah, well, I'll kind of explain it a little bit, at least as he talks about it in his notes. I do want to mention, though, I've played a harpsichord before, and it's not the same as playing a piano. It's a completely different technique. It's more in the wrist. You got to it's not a finger instrument. It's more of a wrist instrument. There's a lot of up and down sort of movement in order to get the keys to press, because it's not like a piano where you just press the key down and the hammer kind of strikes the string. You have to put enough pressure that the plectrum kind of plucks the string inside the harpsichord, and this requires a bit of pressure. And once you do that, you can't really sustain it or anything like that. It just sort of dies away right away. So, and it takes a bit of strength. Well, it takes too much strength, more strength that's in your fingers to do. I mean, you could play it with your fingers, but you'll never get an even tone. So it has to be done with kind of like the wrist. I mean, I'm not a harpsichordist, so I don't really know. I didn't really learn it all the way, but I just remember it was very different than playing a piano. Also, it has tiny, tiny keys, so you got to get your hands in those positions really well. Anyway, but he's playing these on the piano, and I've never heard these works played on the piano before. Not only that, but we'll talk about this when I get to this. Let me just mention the two composers. William Byrd, who I'm familiar with as far as his vocal works go. I've heard a lot of his Renaissance vocal works. Both of these composers composed in the Renaissance era. They're some of their music is kind of a prototype for what would come later in the Baroque era. And they're sort of opposite temperaments. Byrd and Bull are sort of like yin and yang to each other as far as their music goes. So Byrd is kind of the more picturesque composer, more concerned with form. He writes about experiences of life outside of himself. So he's observing, and his music is sort of like kind of, I guess, giving impressions of that. The woods, dances, sounds he hears, that sort of thing. John Bull, on the other hand, is the more emotional composer, at least according to Armstrong. And he's writing about what he's feeling. So his music comes from the inside out. This is what Armstrong says. I'm not saying this in his booklet note. The funny thing is their names actually match their styles. They both have animal names, Byrd and Bull, and you could say Byrd's music kind of sings, whereas Bull's is more kind of like heavy and emotional, kind of temperamental, shall we say? It's kind of interesting that happened. Anyway, on this album, Armstrong uses a pretty big piano sound for the works. I mean, these would never sound like this on a virginal, which is a very quiet instrument, not to mention a harpsichord. And you can hear this in the opening Byrd pieces. There are 3 of them that start off the recording. They're all pretty short. He tactfully uses the sustain pedal. This doesn't really sound like it's one of these recordings where he understands the research that went into Baroque music and the style, and he's keeping that in mind, but he's not necessarily trying to reproduce that sound on the piano. He gets these beautiful, clear tremolo effects, and he has an astonishing technique, which I'll talk about as we get to certain pieces where they appear. He articulates beautifully and makes sure that the divisions between sections of the music are very clear. They register easily, even to people unfamiliar with this style of music. You'll notice when one section ends and the next begins. Not that he's underlining them. He's subtle, but you do hear them. And he respects the terraced dynamics of the Renaissance and Baroque eras. Terraced dynamics means loud and then a sudden softness. Okay, you don't get like crescendos, like a gradual sort of loudness or softness. Although there is one work where he does that, and I'll mention it when it comes up. Just these sudden loud or soft attacks, and he's able to like kind of put on the brakes like really quickly. And sometimes he'll kind of draw like a breath from you like that. It was really nice to hear. Okay, let's go on here. We have William Byrd, his first set of works. He has the first 7 tracks on the album on CD 1. What stood out for me among these, the flute and the drum, which is sort of picturesque. It's probably more effective on the piano than it would be on the harpsichord, although the drumming effect in the bass is possible on the harpsichord. And he gets this nice rumble on the piano. He's definitely using the piano's resources for that one. The next piece, The Woods So Wild. This is track 5. He puts the rhythm in high relief, and I really like this kind of playing where it really sounds dancey as opposed to somebody reading through a score. Remember, he's a composer, and composers, I've noticed, I've heard Benjamin Britten's playing and Thomas Addis. Whenever they play, they really put the rhythm across very well. They kind of understand the rhythmic wellspring that music comes from. They seem to have like a real connection with it, and Armstrong does that as well. I really enjoyed that. His playing, the rhythm, the instrument, it all comes across as one big kind of gesture. This music is all highly listenable. You get the impression, too, that Armstrong is really enthusiastic about this project. You can hear that he enjoys playing these works, and the enthusiasm is infectious. I really enjoyed listening to this myself. Okay, anyway, after the first 7 Byrd works, we get onto John Bull, a few fantasias by him. Armstrong says that Bull is the more temperamental of the two. So it's important to remember that we're in the Renaissance when we're listening for emotion. So we're not going to get the big, dragon blast of passion that we get in romantic music, that like in Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet, where it's like just this full blast passion. These people were a lot more kind of subtle and refined and sort of, demonstrative, let's say, not, just full on. So we're not going to hear that kind of thing. The first work we hear by Bull is a Fantasia. Some interesting things start happening by the middle of this. It starts pretty unassumingly. It gets louder. There's a Siciliano rhythm in the bass. Siciliano rhythm is on the 1 and 3 of a 3 rhythm, like dun 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 is a Siciliano. And the right hand really goes crazy over that. I really enjoyed hearing this. I'm like, wow. And that's how emotion is put across in I guess this era of music, by speed, by just the energy of the music. Okay, the piece starts with a dramatic flourish as well. Armstrong is also really good at making sure that you hear any fleeting oddities of harmony as they peek out of the texture for a moment and then go back to something with a little more fitting in the piece. I really enjoy this about this era of music in general. They'll have this odd sort of chord and then it'll just go somewhere else, where for a moment it kind of feels like the whole world's going to fall apart, and then it just doesn't, miraculously doesn't. I like that. Bach does this a lot as well. Actually, Scarlatti does it a lot. Domenico Scarlatti in his music. Bull's harmony has a bit of an abruptness to it. I guess that's part of his, quote, temperamentality. There's a piece called The Fantastic Galliard. It ends pretty suddenly, as do all of the canons. All right. I really enjoyed his piece Le Buffon. It's a set of 15 variations. It's a catchy and appealing piece, very upbeat. And in this particular piece, Armstrong's playing of the scales is really, I've used the word astonishing quite a few times, I know, but this is one of those audible techniques that you hear this. He's got a fantastically smooth technique. His articulation is always crisp and clear. Like all the notes are played at the same volume, the same level. It's really amazing. He also uses slight crescendos in the bull pieces, probably in order to accentuate his rising emotion. He does this in the Walsingham variations, of which there are 30. So he's kind of cheating a little there. That resource would not have been available to these composers at the time in keyboard music. The Walsingham variations, this is still on CD1 by Bull, keep the same melodic profile all the way through. So you would think they could get boring, but it's because the melodies never really transformed as they are in certain works of variations. But Armstrong is fantastic at making sure we're hearing a different variation. He'll vary them according to the volume, level of attack, and little rhythmic alterations that he hears in them. He's really good at this. He's really attentive to his performance and what he's trying to put across. There's one bit in this too where he plays this really fast scale at this very low level of volume, like it's very quiet, and it's so smooth. It's just amazing. You hear every note as you would in this era. It's not like you put the sustain pedal down and everything just kind of blurs together. No, it's all really clear and crisp. He's attacking very gently, but he's still getting this very full yet very soft sound. Amazing. This really needs to be heard, I think. Okay, anyway, on disc 1, we have it's almost like a John Bull sandwich. We have William Byrd sections acting as the bread in the sandwich, and it ends with Byrd's music. And I'll mention the last piece, the bells, which is played in the lower and middle range of the piano before it moves to a melody in the upper range at about the halfway point. It reminds me a bit of François Couperin's Le Barricade Mystérieuse, which is played entirely in the middle range of the harpsichord. This kind of fascinates me. People had a thing about the middle range of the harpsichord in this period. They really liked the sound it made, because I tend to hear this in a lot of pieces. At the end of the bells, there's a fade-out effect that the pianist does on his own. It's not a studio trick. It's pretty amazing. He just kind of crescendos down. Again, cheating for this era, but kind of made me wonder if the whole piece wasn't going to fade out. It didn't. It ends on an ending chord, but I was kind of surprised by that. Okay, the disc 2, once we get to disc 2, we start with John Bull. And then we alternate between the two. So he's sort of, the two discs kind of proceed in different ways. This particular one starts with two short works by John Bull. Then we get 2 by William Byrd, 2 by John Bull, 2 by William Byrd. Bull, Byrd, and Bull. Okay, so it alternates between them. Sort of like a music contest, I guess you could think about it. These are a little different. We do get a set of Walsingham variations by William Byrd on this, and in this one he does sort of vary them enough that you have to kind of listen for the melody. But again, it's always pretty easy to hear. The entire album ends with on a kind of resigned note by John Bull. I guess we ended with the emotion on his on the last work called Tellurus Ingens Conditur, which is Latin, which I don't speak. Okay. This album, I have to say, it was a double album. I listened to it in 2 days. I didn't have time to listen to it all in the same day, but I would have. It was very listenable. It was kind of, I easily could have listened to it all at one sitting. It was really enjoyable. And I was constantly surprised by the technique, the new sort of little magic tricks that Armstrong pulled out of his bag of technique to vary these works and make them constantly interesting. Really amazing. I was really impressed by this, and I would urge you to give it a listen, just for the playing if you don't like the music much. But what's not to like? It's very appealing Renaissance era music.
Yeah, I suppose there will inevitably be some purists who don't like the idea of doing this with a modern piano.
Yeah, and that's fine. There are original recordings out there.
To me, I was interested in the concept, and actually listening to what he does with these pieces on piano makes me want to hear them again on a virginal or harpsichord, just in
just to compare
the original context. That said, for me, I thought the program was a bit long.
It was long, yeah.
Yeah. The music is not, especially coming from like a post-Baroque sensibility, I don't find the compositions overly interesting, although, some of them are quite good, but as far as a complete program of all of that. However, I will say that Armstrong does his best to pull out, the interesting points and the emotional content and contrasts, which he's able to do, with the modern piano. So I think he makes them as interesting as possible. And you can tell that he's studied these a lot to figure out, what's really going on, both in terms of the compositions and what he, sees as the emotional points or, the climaxes and interesting things in them. And then he really does pull off some amazing technical playing. The first pieces you listen to, the birds are, they're well constructed and they're interesting. But when he gets to the Bulls Fantasia, track 8, and then that sort of explosion of notes, you're like, whoa. That really, right? If you were starting to go into a little low there, you'll be woken up with that. So, I thought it was interesting. And I like that he's done something different in terms of the repertoire. I mean, probably no one else would have picked these to work on in, an album. Yeah. And so I thought it was an interesting listen. His technique is really great. He does some interesting things with the contrast that's in this music. And I have, a little bit of a knowledge of Bird's music, but I don't think I've heard this much of Bull's playing either. So, worth checking out. You probably want to do one disc at a time because there's a lot here. Yeah. And you'll get some respect for Armstrong's strong technique. And, if this is going to be the direction he goes in, sort of creating unique programs of music we don't expect, that could, he is really young. As you mentioned, he was a prodigy, not only in music, but apparently in science and other kinds of studies. So if he starts pulling in unexpected kinds of discoveries from music that other people aren't playing, it could be an interesting career of adding things. Last week when we were looking at the Gramophone Awards, there was, what category was it? It was like all Bach, right? It's like,
that was instrumental, I think.
There's
right?
a lot of great
guitar.
recordings, but still. So just on the program here, I think he's done something really interesting, and reimagining these on piano while keeping what he can best interpret to be the intent of the composer with modern capabilities, and being really interested in this kind of thing as a project. That's really commendable, and deserves a listen.
Absolutely. One of the things I like about the approach he uses, he seems, he's a composer as well, and he plays. He has a great technique. Not all composers do. They compose a lot, so they're not practicing every day. But I don't know. He apparently is, because I don't think he can keep this kind of technique without all that practice. But composers, when they don't really adhere to any school of playing the way that pianists do, because pianists will have a teacher, and they'll kind of absorb whatever that teacher is kind of, they'll kind of be in that teacher's kind of school somehow, and they'll come up with their own sort of unique, approach. But nevertheless, you can kind of tell like which school these people are coming from. Composers seem to escape that somehow. They seem to go directly to the music, and whatever whim they'll have about what they think is there, they'll put out, and it'll usually be very convincing in, they seem to have a lot of insight into music, and I feel like I got a lot of that from Armstrong's playing. I really enjoyed hearing him, and I'm going to be watching him. Also, this is one of those Deutsche Grammophon programs that won them the award. We talked about Vikingur Olafsson, I think, a few weeks ago, his Mozart and Contemporaries album, and that was a really intriguing program and whole package as well. Really enjoying seeing this in classical music, actually. Anyway, there you go. That's what we have to say about this one. I liked this a lot. Okay. All right.
Yeah, get your Renaissance fix.
Get your Renaissance fix. Okay, now, remember the scene in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the cavemen or whatever they are, or the ape men, are sort of they discover the weapon of the bone, and one of them throws it up in the air, and then suddenly it turns into the spaceship, and we've leapt like millions of years into the future from that scene.
That's what we're going to do now. Yeah,
that's what we're going to do now.
Yeah. Throw that bone, John Bird. And,
here we go. So we're going to go from William Byrd to contemporary composers, Arvo Pärt, and then Petrus Vasquez.
Yeah. So you need a blank slate in order to do this, and so that's what you're going to get. Right.
Okay. So this is an entirety of music history a gulf of music history in between these people. But I want to kind of, before we talk about, I'm going to do Arvo Pärt first. But before we do that, I want to just kind of mention these two composers, say something about them. Arvo Pärt is the most performed composer in the world today. Apparently, still, he has been for years and years. There might be someone who was performed more than him. The most performed contemporary living composer is what I want to say, because obviously people like Beethoven and Mozart are still being performed like all over the place. He's from Estonia. And he's around, he's in his 80s now, I think. And the other composer, Petrus Vasquez, is from Latvia, nearby Latvia. Different culture, but they have certain things in common. They were both Soviet, in the Soviet Union when that was going. And that has affected their music. One thing that's interesting about these two is it's been said about Bruckner and Mahler, that Bruckner was holy and he was expressing God in his music, whereas Mahler was always looking for God and not finding him. So you had this kind of like dichotomy between these two composers. I kind of feel like the same sort of thing exists between these two composers, with Arvo Pärt in the expressing his experience of God to everybody, and Vasks, searching and seeing the conflict of the world and not quite getting there. In fact, I think Vasks may have mentioned something like this at one point when he was comparing his music to Pärt's. Anyway, let's talk about the music. The first album we're going to talk about is Arvo Pärt, a disc of Arvo Pärt's orchestral music, or some of it's chamber music, but instrumental music, let's say, non-vocal music, called Tabula Rasa. Pärt is mostly known for his vocal, choral music. Most of it written for the Eastern Orthodox Church. Most of them are on religious texts, though there are some that aren't. Please try to hear his work, "My Heart's in the Highlands," on the Scottish poem. A really beautiful work. That's not on this album, so you have to look elsewhere for that. Okay, Tabula Rasa. This is performed by the Orchestre de Chambre de Lausanne in Switzerland, conducted by Renaud Capuçon, who's also the violinist on the works that require a violin. There are also various other soloists in the chamber works. All right, there are 7. This is only instrumental works. There are 7 works in total on this album. They're all pretty short except for one. And all of them have been recorded before, and they're all pretty well known. Okay, so there's nothing new on this album. If you're new to Arvo Pärt, this would be a good place to start. You'll hear all of his best music all at the same time.
I agree.
Yeah. In the booklet notes, which feature only an interview with the conductor, Capuçon says that Pärt's music, like Bach's, has the ability to fix something, to heal something deep inside of you. An interesting comment, I would say. I think that's why so many people gravitate towards his music. They get a sense that there's something there that's repairing them in a way, or something, it's fixing something broken inside of us, or maybe in our culture or society. One wonders if that can radiate forth from music.
I think, too, in both of these composers, as modern composers approach, although their style, they both have their own unique approaches with using harmony and other techniques. The music is inherently approachable and understandable, and both in the sounds that you hear and in the sort of, how can I say, the building blocks of the compositions. And so although you'll hear some unusual or non-standard harmonic techniques and what they're trying to represent in the music, you may not understand unless you read about it. If you give the music attention, you'll find enough in there familiar to your ear and also pleasing, and also the progression of the sounds and the works will be comprehensible and satisfying to you. And so, a lot of people may say that, I don't like contemporary classical music, or it doesn't sound nice, or it's too complicated. I believe these are two of the best composers that anyone who likes music. Yeah, they're two of the best living
composers, absolutely.
As far as, just being music that, with a minimal investment of your attention, you definitely get something out and find something beautiful in the works that they create.
Yeah, they both create beautiful moments at least, whereas Pärt, his works are generally beautiful all the way through. He really just create his own world in his music. So if contemporary music is something that puts you off, maybe because you heard some like 12-tone music or Schoenberg, I need to mention that's not contemporary music anymore. That's something from the 20th century, and it's done now. Now it's still used a little bit, but as an expressive thing. But nobody actually composes completely in that idiom anymore. They'll use elements of it, like in their compositions. But no worries, that doesn't happen at all here. This music is very tonal and often diatonic, which means it's kind of has keys and things like that.
I feel that with these composers, so much of that 20th century music was sort of the slave to a technique or a new approach.
Right. That's what wound up happening.
Yeah, things got fit into this new paradigm. And I think these composers, the arc of the work and the point of the expression was ultimately what was important to them. And they had their own style and approaches and techniques that they used, but the overall story or the theme of the composition, which they both express very well if you read about, they explain what they're doing in their works. That is ultimately what was most important to them and which guided their approach, and that comes through the arc of the compositions. And I find, all of their works something that I can follow along, and even in the, sort of limited places where I hear something that I'm really not sure what's going on, those are sort of in the minority of, the types of passages, and I'm able to map them out in my mind and find things that sound really lovely and also surprising, but in total, they're really satisfying works, and so I think they have a broad appeal for people who haven't heard them yet to will enjoy them.
Pärt's music is really unique too, in that he seems to achieve this kind of stillness, this meditative sort of quality in his music, and especially on the works that we hear on this disc. Capuçon, Renaud Capuçon, the violinist and conductor on this album, says that Pärt's music comes from the depths and it's elevated. Yeah, this is music. It feels weird for me to say that it's easy on the ear. There's nothing offensive about this. It really is very mellifluous, but there's a heaviness and a depth to it that's really going to make you feel like a full human being. It's like you're not hearing light music here, even though it doesn't sound like there's a lot going on.
I think that it never uses, he doesn't use overly complex things when he can express his ideas with sort of, I don't want to say simple, but I want to say not overly dense sort of things. So the denseness, there are some dense harmonies and sort of tone colors created with a palette of things. But as far as what's going on rhythmically or in the lines of the composition, I think he is sort of a less is more kind of approach that creates a sense of honesty, but also something that is not aiming to astound you with the technical aspects of what's going on, but pulls you in to appreciate the tones, the beauty, and then the logic of where he's going with that. And so to me, it's music that, even though it may be unusual compared to some other things, I can understand what he's trying to do and the direction the music is going. I feel like it's an honest expression rather than something that's trying to wow me with some sort of technique.
Yeah, one of the things, it's what you mentioned, the honesty, and that really comes across too in things like when you hear a string section, you'll hear the rough texture of the strings. Like we generally think of strings, mass strings, as having the sheen to them. But that's not the case in Pärt's music. There's kind of a roughness of the bow going across the strings, and you hear that very clearly in his music. And there's something really honest about that in a way. So I think that's what part of what you mean by honesty. Another thing that makes these works so appealing is that they're in modal harmony. And that's so appealing. I just wish like modal harmony was like a big thing. It tends to come into vogue every once in a while and then go away. But church music is modal harmony, and it often has this kind of floaty quality in the sense that you don't have the sense of gravity where it's all heading towards this one tone where it's going to be at rest. And this is part of the reason why they used this in church, because it kind of felt like it wasn't tied to the earth. It was kind of floating above the ground or something like that. Whereas like dance music would be, kind of diatonic and tonal, and want to tie you to the earth. Okay, so you do hear that rough texture of the strings, and I think that sound is an integral part of these pieces. Not only that, on this particular recording, you hear that extremely well. This is an exceptionally well recorded set of these works. I want to mention there's a really famous recording of Pärt's music released on the ECM label, also called Tabula Raza, in the 1970s, featuring Gidon Kremer and Tatiana Gridenko, and the composer Alfred Schnittke on the prepared piano, and Keith Jarrett on the piano when they played Fratres. So it's quite an all-star cast, and it's a great recording for the time. But I think I can't. That recording is so famous; it's just sort of legendary. But I think this recording is so clean and so detailed. It's really something to hear. I think it's well worth hearing. Also, the pacing of all the works is really beautiful. Let's start with the first work, Tabula Raza. This is in 2 movements. It's written for 2 violins, string orchestra, and prepared piano. A prepared piano is a piano that's prepared, that has like certain objects wedged between the strings, so that it has like almost like a cymbalom type sound. Okay, John Cage apparently invented this, but it's occasionally used. It's really an interesting thing, because it's the person's hitting the keys, and you never know what sound you're going to hear depending on how the piano is prepared. In this case, it's used very gently. Okay, we have 2 movements. The first shorter movement is called ludus. They both have ludus, Ludus, which is, it means a game or fun or diversion in Latin. Okay, so we're getting these 2 violins playing. The way the work begins is really interesting too. The 2 violins start on a sustained note on their lowest and highest notes. Okay, so you're hearing both the highest and the lowest note the violin is capable of making at the very beginning. And then the orchestral strings play like a ticking pattern that just keeps repeating and leads to solo material from the violins, which is different each time. So it's repetitive, but it's not. It's kind of interesting. The process is repeated throughout the movement, and the recording is so clear. The articulation of the violins is absolutely superb. This has better sound than that early ECM recording, and we think of ECM as being this well-recorded label. The prepared piano's chimes in this movement come through with a kind of physicality. They sort of they're sort of forward, and but they're soft, and they really just sort of impact the body in a gentle way. It kind of feels like you're getting a little gentle shiatsu done, if there's such a thing. I don't know. Shiatsu seems to always cause pain to me, but it does kind of feel like it's sort of pressing on some important points of your body and maybe healing you. I don't know. You can feel the vibration in the room with you. And a lot of details in this score that I hadn't picked up in earlier recordings register clearly here, such as the violins playing in octave harmony. That can often sound like a single violin, but I was able to distinguish the two of them here. So this is really just fantastic if you have an ear for good recordings and really clear sound. The second movement, Silentium, silence, is a quiet movement, and it's longer than the first, and it really sounds like a long conclusion, I guess, to what we heard in the first movement. The material is, again, very repetitive, but, not unappealing because of that. It comes across here as mournful, though. It's not really as playful as in the first movement. Again, very clear sound. The soloists are all fantastic, rich tone violins, and the prepared piano is given real presence in the score. Really beautiful. It's the piano generally plays in its lower sort of register, so it really kind of is very different than the sound you get on the violins. The tapering off of the dynamics as the movement goes on and instruments individually stop playing is really beautiful, and it's not noticeable right away, but once the pattern establishes itself, you really sort of draw attention to it. What you might want to do if you're listening to this on one of our streams that we're going to post for this, listen to the very quiet and beautifully captured descending bass at around the 13-minute and 30-second mark of this second movement. The ending is exquisite in its quietness. This might be the best recording of this work, but please, the original remains a classic. Okay. Next, we have the very famous Fratres, which is a work that was composed without fixed instrumentation. And indeed, it's been arranged for lots of ensembles and is still being arranged for new ensembles to this day. On this particular recording, I should mention the work originally was composed in 1976, and the first, although it's not really official that this is the original, because he wants the instrumentation to be unfixed, but the first performance was for chamber orchestra. This particular version for violin, string, orchestra, and percussion was arranged in 1992. The first performance, starting with the violin arpeggio. Now, the work on violin and piano, the violin and piano version starts with this elaborate violin arpeggio, like this kind of figuration back and forth on the violin. It's pretty impressive to hear. This part is left out of certain arrangements of this work, because if you're on, say, the 12 cello version that we hear on the ECM recording of this, that part is just eliminated because the cellos just won't do that. But the violin arpeggio is heard here, and Capuçon plays it well. It's well recorded, and he actually gets a nice tone on the lower notes. Usually you just hear the person, just kind of, going at it on these on all the strings of the violin. But he actually pulls out the musical material really well. The orchestra and percussion doesn't explode as the piano does usually in the violin and piano version. Instead, it goes for a haunting, shimmery attack on the strings. I noticed this particular, the tempo in this piece is a bit fast when the violin comes in. This is a very slow, meditative work. I think that the slightly faster tempo sort of takes away a bit of the emotion that this work is able to elicit, but nevertheless, it sounds really beautiful. The timbre is beautiful on this from the string orchestra, and the solo violin harmonics are really gorgeous too. There are really no complaints. I think it could have been a shade slower in tempo, I think, but hardly anything to complain about. It's a good performance. The rest of the works on this album are very short. First, we have Summa for string orchestra. This is the fourth track. The orchestra sounds smaller here than I've heard on this work on other albums. It picks up a lot of detail. Gorgeous. It's a gorgeous melancholy work in modal harmony. Then we have one of my favorite of Pärt's orchestral works, Silouan's Song from 1991. For string orchestra, it's calmer, a little melancholy, beautiful modal harmony. It builds to a loud, warm climax, and it's a nice, heartfelt performance. The sixth track, Darf ich, which means may I in German, it features Capuçon on the solo violin. This is for solo violin and string orchestra from 1995. There are bell percussion in this piece that I really enjoyed, that are really gorgeous and register very well in the recording. The violin is placed further forward in this work than in Fratres, I've noticed, and Capuçon gets a really beautiful harmonic sound from his instrument toward the very end of this very brief piece. It's only about 3 minutes long. Another famous work by Pärt is the 7th track, Spiegel im Spiegel, which I guess is mirror in mirror, so mirrored things, 1978. This is for violin and piano. This is the only chamber work on the album, and features Guillaume Bellhomme on the piano, as he was in Tabula Rasa as well in the prepared piano. He plays this sort of arpeggiated chord all the way through the work, and I liked his slow clockwork playing of that figure. Capuçon sounds more sensitive here, probably because of the tempo and what Bellhomme is doing on the piano. This is really as simple as music gets, and yet there's a lot of emotion here. Beautiful, touching work. Give that a listen, absolutely. And the album ends with a work called Fur Lenart. I should have looked up who this was. He was I think he was a sort of patron of music. Okay, in memoriam. This is for his death in 2006 for string orchestra. This starts with a string swell, played forte. The texture thins out as the piece goes on. The mass strings dwindle into groups. And then there's short episodes between a small group of strings and the tutti. The mass strings take over at the end. And the piece ends as if in mid-sentence. It just kind of cuts off. You get the sense of that this is to be continued somehow. And this is the last piece on the album. It's sort of an odd way to end the album. There's really no closure here. The piece is a lament and has a melancholy profile. And we end the program with the renewal that comes from grief. So this music is all very simple in conception, yet possesses enormous psychological weight. Pärt's music really is a miracle. These works are well known and available elsewhere, but these recordings are beautifully recorded and performed. I'd go for this absolutely if sound quality is your top priority. And remember, the Gidon Kramer Tabula Rasa is still a classic on ECM Records. If you want to hear that, I would give that a listen, absolutely.
Yeah. Indeed, an amazing sounding recording, and the performance of Tabula Rasa is really dynamic, the most dynamic I've heard. And I've listened to a lot of other recordings of Pärt's music, but this is the most engaging I've heard yet. What do I have? Another one? I think
I have
maybe
loads.
You shared this one with me. I have one on the Naxos of Tabula Rasa, the Ulster Orchestra with Takuo Yuasa.
Okay, I remember that one, yeah.
Yeah, and I liked it, but it just didn't have the visceral quality that this recording does. And one of the things I think this recording has is the instrumental balance is actually, much better than anything I've heard before. All the parts are really well represented. You can hear everything. The clarity is wonderful. And then you've got a real passionate, dynamic performance by all of the performers in there. So it really made it come alive again to me, although I've heard that work, the Tabula Rasa, many times before. And then the other pieces keep that same character. So if you haven't checked out Pärt's music, I think this would be the best place to start, because you're not going to get an engaging, emotional performance to this level on other recordings. And then the clarity on the recording, this is Erato label, by the way. This is fabulous. So, yeah, as introduction, or even if you've heard this work many times before, I can really recommend this recording.
Yeah, I want to mention, too, how people like us who are kind of familiar with classical music in general, you think Mozart, Beethoven, but these works by Arvo Parrot are also very familiar to us. They've just been around. I've been hearing all of the works on this recording, or most of them anyway, for most of the entirety really of my classical listening life, which really started for me in college. So they're very familiar works for me as familiar as, say, a work by Beethoven and Mozart. So it's kind of nice that they're part of the that contemporary works are part of that the whole sound image that I get of classical music. We often think of classical music as being something old, but it's not. There are new works being written all the time, and we really need to be paying attention to them, especially now that we're getting back to a sort of tonality, and there are some really beautiful works being written.
Yeah, it does. I should mention sound beautiful.
Right. I should mention that I wanted to say this when you were talking about contemporary music. Part of the reason music went crazy sort of in the mid-20th century was because of World War II and the horrors that people experienced in that war. It was thought after the war, after especially the Holocaust, and when people found out what had happened at the Nazi death camps, that emotion couldn't be felt in music anymore. It would there's something vulgar about it, so we couldn't write in a romantic vein, although some people continued writing like that. So there was this idea that music had to be intellectual, and that turned off audiences who still wanted to hear emotion in music. They wanted to hear energy too. Rock and roll became big. Jazz was huge in the 50s and 60s. And we're not in that era anymore. The only thing people could do was have a sense of humor, and György Ligeti kind of had music like that. But since the fall of the Soviet Union, so around the year, and really before that, but we didn't know about it in the West until around the fall of the Soviet Union, music, and especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, remember, the Soviet Union, being communist, had banned all religion. And once it had fallen, Christianity really came back into full force, and a lot of these people started going to church again, and they wanted to just have these spiritual, religious lives and be in those communities. And a lot of religious music started being written, such as the music by Arvo Pärt, or music with great spirituality to it, like maybe not these particular Vasks works, but in general. So there's a spiritual bent in the music of Eastern Europe that came after the fall of the Soviet Union, and that's really what renewed contemporary music. So we should be listening to this. And still, for me, the music of Eastern Europe, to an extent, modern Russian music, and the Scandinavian countries and Finland as well has been really fascinating since the end of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I think those kind of historical things, we can say, something can't be fun or beautiful anymore, but I think it splits things in different directions. I think in pop music, during the Vietnam War, you get like all these angry protest songs that sort of came out because, this is, I talk about it with young people. Today, of course, social media is the outlet for angst and people's opinion. But in the 60s, it was still music. And, the artists were sort of a megaphone platform for young people's feelings. So you had, first, earlier in the 60s, you had the sort of the veiled protests of Bob Dylan, where you had to sort of get the implications of his music. By the end of the Vietnam War, they were outright, blatant things that could get by the censors. But at the same time, you had this sort of, hard political message and reactions that were very focused on the evils and ugliness that's going on. You had, the Beach Boys with, right. Don't Worry Baby and songs like that just they provided a complete, tonal escape from the bad things that were going on in the day. And I think it's just part of human nature that at any time, people are going to react to their environment in a variety of ways. And although someone may point a finger and say, this can't, we can't appreciate this kind of beauty, or we don't have the naivety to sort of, think like this or enjoy this. It's not really true. You're going to see different types of emotional reactions to events in the art forms. And if you go back, you can't do it at the time that something's happening, because, you need that sort of distance of time and the benefit of analysis to see what develops out of that. But I think, difficult times will create difficult music, but they'll also create music of great beauty. And return to earlier forms, and also a sort of mourning and also a celebration of things. And I think that's one interesting connection of society and music that always happens in any kind of time period, in the distant past, in the recent history, and then probably right now. But we probably won't be able to talk about it until we can look back at some point in the future.
Right, but we are going through a good phase in classical music composition right now. Tonality is back. It's not necessarily romantic. There are kind of modernist and post-war sort of elements in music, but they're not necessarily ugly, although, things can be appealingly ugly. I just think of a lot of rock and roll. I mean,
I think composers feel like it's
distorted guitars are ugly, but they're exciting, so
it's okay to write some modern classical music that actually sounds beautiful. That's okay.
Right.
I think people feel like it's okay to do that again, which is nice.
Yeah, and one person who thinks that that's okay is our next composer, Petrus Vasks, Latvian composer. And he is the most performed contemporary Latvian composer, so he doesn't get the most performed composer award, which Arvo Pärt gets. But I had mentioned that he's kind of looking for God, but this particular program doesn't have anything to do with that. There are other works by him where he's kind of juxtaposed. He likes to juxtapose the kind of a sort of beauty and ugliness sort of together in his works and try to sort of reconcile them. But that's not what happens here, because we're hearing a performance of his Oboe Concerto from the year 2018. This work's only 3 years old. This is about as new as a work can get and get on a CD.
If this was a hot dog, you could still eat it, and it would not have degraded.
Oh, wow. I had
to pull it off the shelf and be just as fresh as it was.
Did you say that to the composer if you met him? Your work is like a hot dog.
Still fresh after 3 years.
Yeah, we have. It's still a fresh work. This is its first recording, and two other shorter works from the 1980s on this disc. Now, the one is called Message, Vestigiums. I don't know how to pronounce Latvian. Message from 1982, and also Lauda, which is Latin lauds or praise. For symphony orchestra. Message is for 2 piano strings and percussion. So the soloist, the oboe soloist, Albrecht Meyer, one of the world's leading oboe soloists, he's German. And the Latvian National Symphony Orchestra is playing these, conducted by Andris Poga.
I have a feeling that oboe players were just waiting for this work to be composed.
Yeah, this is on the Ondine label, I want to mention. Okay, as far as oboe concertos go, the only one I can really think of is the Vaughan Williams one, because that one gets recorded often. You've heard that one, right?
Yes, yeah.
And like this one, it's also very pastoral. It kind of has to do with the countryside. The oboe concerto is the major work on this particular album. It's 3 movements, and Vasks admits that he sees the oboe as a pastoral instrument, and that's very clear from what we hear in this work.
2 pastoral movements. I mean, come on.
Yeah, 2 of them are very pastoral. Actually, the third one arguably is too, but we'll get to that when we get there.
They both have it in the name.
It's a little darker, though.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so drama and tragedy, the composer says, do not come to mind when we hear the oboe. Now, this is a composer that really makes his bank in drama and tragedy, and he's not going that way here. So he'd like this work to be viewed as akin to a human life with its beginning, period of maturity, and departure. And the departure doesn't end in darkness either. He kind of seems to think that something goes on, judging by the ending of this work. Okay, and he would, because he kind of writes in a spiritual vein a lot of the time. It kind of makes sense. You could also think of this as a long cosmological day, which lasts 100 years. That's kind of how he wants you to think about it. So you have the sunrise, the afternoon would be the peak of the day, then there's the evening, which would be the third movement. And at the very end of the third movement, we kind of hear the opening of the piece again, as though the sun is rising again, sort of. So it's sort of like a cycle. It's just going to keep happening. All right. So the first movement, Morning Pastoral. Oh, Even the title sounds appealing, doesn't it? Just kind of want to hear that. And it begins with this. Vasks, I should mention, he says that the statement this movement makes is, quote, "This is how we live here, and this is what my country sounds like." Wow. Okay. That would be a nice thing if everybody would just write a piece like that, huh? Yeah, let's go. I would say this sounds
I want to have breakfast in Latvia tomorrow,
right?
Yeah.
This sounds like a place I want to be. Going by this movement. It begins with this lovely shimmering sound in the massed strings, and this is sort of the sunrise of the piece. The oboe enters full voiced above this gentle bed. And pastoral is indeed the operative word here. There's summery folk song quality to the melody. It's accompanied by some punctuation in wood blocks. You hear some of these like gentle percussion throughout the movement. There's a lot of nicely placed gentle percussion, luscious orchestration. This whole opening had me smiling and feeling warm. Oh, it's so nice. You really need to hear this, listeners. Go to that right now. Make this the first thing you hear. It's wonderfully executed, too. The oboe's lines are modal, probably pentatonic, because it's echoing folk songs, and many folk songs are in a pentatonic mode. Now, if you don't know what that means, think of rock music guitar solos. They're usually pentatonic. So it's got that kind of like immediately appealing sort of sound. You hear it in a lot of folk songs, too. I'm thinking about it. When I listened to this, I was thinking about how nice it is to hear the oboe take the lead in such a large work. It's not something you hear often. Okay, the opening reaches a climax 3 minutes in. Then we get a more subdued passage for the orchestra. The oboe eventually comments on that. It's always easy to single out the soloist. That nasal sound high up in the register is easy to spot. And he seems rather placed rather forward in the mix. But that doesn't obscure the orchestral detail, which is very clear. This is another excellently recorded work. This section doesn't sing as freely as the opening. It sounds more like it's headed somewhere. So the focus is on the progression. There are lovely moments of winds in the orchestra, imitating birdsong. Folk song abounds. At 7-minute mark, a climax is reached. And we're off to the second movement. And the first movement seems sort of introductory. It sets a mood, and then in the second movement we get a scherzando, which means a joking. This is the longest movement. It's 14 minutes long, double the length of the first movement. And Vasks suggests this can be thought of as a pastoral scene, in which 3 young girls are sitting in a rose garden, and an interested suitor comes by. The movement contains a lot of references to Latvian folk song, and the movement moves between like a 3/4 and a 4/4 rhythm. You notice this. It's pretty easy to spot. The whole rhythmic pattern changes often, and it's a nice effect. The tone completely changes at one point to a sort of bumbling march rhythm, with the oboe playing a more restricted melody. The reedy tones always evoke the countryside, though. The rhythm starts to sway in 3/4 time in what's called that Siciliano rhythm that I mentioned before, and the oboe plays a melody in 3. There's another sudden gorgeous rhythm and melody change after the music had reverted back to a square 4/4 at about the 2 minute and 40 second mark. The melody is in 3. The more severe 4/4 rhythm reappears at 4 minutes and 20 seconds. I'm guessing that the 3/4 rhythm evokes nature, while the 4/4 rhythm indicates man's attempts to control and ruin it. He mentions that he's got that dichotomy going on here. There's a long solo segment for the oboe at around the 7-minute mark, in which a pleading tone is assumed. So he's sort of like pleading with humanity to stop destroying the environment. It's recorded really close, and you can hear the oboe's breaths here as he readies to play his phrases. It's very intimate. There's a moment of anxiety in the melody as the oboe's solo speeds up at the 9-minute mark. Then the plea returns. The cadenza ends at 11 minutes. This is a very long cadenza at 4 minutes. The opening swaying Siciliano rhythm comes back. Remember, Siciliano rhythm is bum, 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 bum. It's in 3 with the second beat missing. With a tone missing in the second beat. As does the theme. It gets interrupted by sizzling strings, and the theme changes to a dotted rhythm in 4/4. it's a very appealing ending as we hear the orchestra in all of its brighter sounds with twinkling percussion along with kettle drums. And this is attached to the third movement. There's no pause, which is called Evening Pastoral, which is sort of an odd name because it doesn't really sound like a pastoral. It doesn't sound like a countryside thing. It's a little darker. Folk song references can also be heard in this movement. It's also pretty long at 12 minutes. And it starts ominously with darker tones playing forte in the orchestra. The oboe enters gently accompanied by rising strings, and then the English horn comes in. It's sort of like it's the oboe's pal here. It's a little more restricted in its range, and I think that's what Vasks wants. It's given a solo line to complement it. It's sort of like the oboe's companion. I guess he's kind of found someone to be friends with in this piece. The oboe theme is plaintive. The English horn and oboe trade off gentle laments, probably about the state of the world. At about the halfway mark, the orchestra picks up on the laments and punctuates it with ominous percussion. Everything quietens at the 7-minute 45-second mark, and the oboe plays. It sounds a bit muffled and far away here. Its friend, the English horn, joins in and sings along with it. The writing between these two instruments is conversational, and the majority of this movement is melancholy in tone, an odd way to end a concerto, and even a work as bright as this. At the 10-minute mark, with 2 minutes left to go, we hear the shimmering strings of the opening again. Then the oboe comes in with a pastoral solo, accompanied by subtle wood blocks in the percussion. So the new day is beginning after 100 years of one day, and we're going to have these events repeat. Or after death, the oboe protagonist has reached a better place, or he's starting a new life on some other plane. The change of color is rather sudden and indicates an unexpected new beginning. So in the end, this is a very positive work, and has the good overcoming the bad. The musical language between the recent Oboe Concerto and the two early works that follow are very different. We'll get to those in a minute. Do you want to talk about the Oboe Concerto first? Or?
I thought this, more than any work I've heard, it brings out the best of the tonal qualities of the oboe. And then it gives it, this setting of the best sort of environment where that sound can be displayed to full effect. And then the orchestral images are also really beautiful in that setting. And then you get these, two pastoral movements. The first one is more of what we normally expect. And the final one, as you say, is a bit darker, but he's going for something different. And it's nice how he brings that English horn in too. So I thought this was really engaging and really, beautiful. And I can't think of any kind of piece that's such an extended and beautiful showcase for oboe. And just putting it out there, normally you're going to hear this, as a small part in a quiet section of an orchestral work where the oboe gets a little bit of shine, and then it moves on to something. But here, to have a feature concerto for oboe, and then also being able to be heard with all these other interesting orchestral parts behind it, it makes it unique and really interesting and satisfying. So yeah, great work. I'm going to listen to this a few more times.
I will too. I'll go back to this. And listen, I urge you, if you think you don't like contemporary music, go listen to this right now and like it. I don't even have to tell you to like it. You will. It's really appealing. It's very good. As long as you like the nasal sound the oboe makes. It's got this kind of woodsy sort of pastoral sound. I could see that sound turning certain people off, but not me. I like it a lot.
Yeah, oboe is cool.
Okay, so we have two more one movement works on this album, and it's they're both from the 1980s. Now, the thing to keep in mind, one thing about classical music is it's very much of its time, and we have centuries of this kind of music, and it's pretty important to keep in mind when certain works were written, if you know. Now, Vasks was living in Latvia when these two works were written, and they were still under Soviet rule. That's kind of important to understand. Now, Gorbachev had become the leader of the Soviet Union, so there was a thaw in artistic expression. And while Gorbachev was in charge, the satellite, what would become the satellite Soviet countries, started to freely sort of advocate for how can I say, freedom, or a more free sort of cultural sort of expression in their countries. Now, this first piece called Message, or in Latvian, something resembling Vestigiums. I think that the line over the E and the I are kind of like in Japanese, where it's just like an extended, it's like
long vowel.
A long vowel, but it's a vowel held for double its length, sort of. This is written for 2 pianos, percussion, and string. What is this? I got to check.
String orchestra, percussion, and 2 pianos.
Yeah. There's no indication on the album who these performers are. So I'm guessing it's just people from the orchestra. This is a one-movement work, and Vasks wants to communicate how beautiful the world is and what we in our hubris are doing to it. So I guess you could say it's an environmental work in a way. But this is from the 1980s. It's not one of these sort of, Greta Thunberg didn't have anything to say about this.
Mercy me.
He was way ahead of that. He was aware of what was happening back then.
How dare you?
Oh, yeah. All right, so the work starts quietly with pianos and strings playing unsteadily in the bass register. It kind of sounds drunken to my ears, but Vasks says it's in the quiet movement that it represents the quiet movement of the earth leading to sunrise. Repeated notes on the piano punctuate a build-up to higher registers in the strings. This all builds to a splashy piano figuration and airy strings. So far, this work is all about timbre, the sound the instruments are making. And in fact, that's very important in modern music in general. Listen to the sounds the various instruments are making. The composers choose those sounds because they want them to register in your ear for a very specific reason. Okay, a pizzicato figure is played in the violins as the lower strings and the music builds up, and we get a repeated melodic figure in the strings. The new episode begins quietly building to forte, and this is repeated throughout the work. This piece sounds sort of minimal and episodic. One wonders how Vasks came up with this, especially since minimalism is really an American thing. Steve Reich, Philip Glass, Terry Riley, and later John Adams. The material is different each time. There will be some identifiable figuration as the music builds to crescendo. Then suddenly it quiets again. Each time the orchestra builds to a climax, the music sounds more joyful until there's a breakdown at the 10-minute mark and the percussion tries to go against the ecstasy in the building strings. The music dies down again at the 12-minute 30-second mark and builds up to a more fraught crescendo to end the piece. In a way, Vasks' vision is positive. He says, the cosmos rejoices, we, the insane, will be lost, but the miracle of the world will remain. Anyway, I do question that. This is one of the things that drives me crazy about the environmental movement. They say we're harming the earth, but we're not. We're harming ourselves. The earth is going to go on. We might not. It's almost like they don't want to talk about the fact that humanity can be destroyed by all of this. It's a really funny thing. But Vasks understands what the stakes are, and I really appreciate that.
Did you say steaks?
Oh, are there any steaks on the grill there?
I ate a whole chicken today, but I'll keep eating steaks no matter what they do to the environment. Because I heard that soybean production is actually worse for the soil. But
oh, really?
I won't be around to worry about it. So I thought this was an interesting work, and what I thought was, kind of. I was listening for, string orchestra, percussion, and 2 pianos. So it sort of sets you up to think, okay, why does he need 2 pianos and what are they going to do? But here, they're just part of the overall picture that he's painting here. And so with these kind of huge clustering chords that he gets, the pianos are panned in the stereo too. And so there's these really close tones and clustered chords, and then they alternate you can hear them in the right channel is the lower piano, and then the higher end is in the left. And so I think that's why he has 2 pianos here, just getting this sort of effect in the big wash of sound. There's a lot of things going on in the kind of tones and textures in here, and it's pretty interesting. The percussion is used really well, and you get all these kind of textures. So I enjoyed this. Kept me interested to the end because it does change up a lot, and the direction and the moods and things. So whatever the vestigiums or however you say it, the message. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting work to follow through.
I think Greta Thunberg would enjoy this piece.
I don't know. You think it would make her smile?
Well, yeah, maybe it would be nice to see for once. We'll have to get her on the program and have her listen to it, and make her smile. All right, last piece on the work, Lauda. In the 1980s, this is written in 1985. There was a folklore movement that started growing in the Soviet Latvia, and this particular piece sort of reflects that a bit. It starts with a chiming church bell and an alto flute, a rarely heard instrument, sort of like a low flute, and it's a pretty fascinating sound. It just kind of doesn't sound like a normal flute. It's lower. It's got more
some body
darker
to
tones to it. Yeah, it's got more body. It doesn't sound like a bird, basically. Although the melody it plays sounds modal, and I said that it sounds like something out of Russian church music, but in the notes, it's described as being like the subdued sound of an oriole. So I guess it does have a bird sound. I didn't really pick that up, though.
Yeah, it's very rich.
Those aren't Vasks' words, by the way. That's like a music critic's words.
Yeah, it's rich. And then it also, as it goes into this, it leads to some really nice bass clarinet notes in there, too. So
yeah, in fact, this particular motif, this melody, has been labeled by a music historian as a motif of growth. And it does. It sort of leads to growth in, like you said, the bass clarinet and in other instruments as well. So the slow build stops for new material at the 3-minute 30-second mark. Then there's an upward climb in the strings. The piece reaches a crescendo and then recedes. This seems to be a common part of Vasks' approach in his earlier years. The music builds and then it's sort of like decrescendos, and and then there's a slow build, and then it just sort of quietens down again. Quiet new material begins. There's an interplay between wind instruments alternating with percussion. The themes sound very Russian or Slavic to my ear, and would probably be familiar to Latvian listeners. They could probably identify a lot of the tunes if he's using familiar tunes. I always kind of envy people like, for example, Russians who can identify the Russian folk tunes in Rimsky-Korsakov's music. So for us, we can tell they're folk tunes. We don't know what they are, unless we actually read books about it or study it. I always kind of, the people from that country have like this special, although we as Americans, we can identify like American tunes pretty easily, like in Ives's music or things like that.
Right.
Although those tunes aren't around anymore, like Turkey in the Straw. Do you actually know how that goes unless you've actually,
Stephen Foster tunes and all that good stuff.
Yeah, the Stephen Foster, but young people don't know it anymore.
They don't know it.
It's just not,
They might hear it on Bugs Bunny if it's on Saturday morning, but that's
true. That's how I know them, really, from those early cartoons. Okay, so let's see, where am I in this? Okay, there's a brass fanfare at about that cuts off at about the 7-minute 20-second mark, which I liked a lot.
There's some good brass in here, yeah.
Yeah, there is. Okay, quiet new material begins. This time an interplay between wind instruments alternating with percussion. Mm-hmm. The themes sound very Russian or Slavic and would probably be familiar to Latvian listeners, as I said. The pattern of crescendo then quiets, new material continues. At the 15-minute mark, there are some quiet, mournful material accompanied by wood percussion, which Vasks seems to like a lot. The tone suddenly brightens and we hear a rising church-like modal melody in the strings. These melodies tend to wind a circle back to their opening their opening note. And the music ends quietly and hopefully with gentle chimes in the percussion. One thing that the notes point out is that it's been said that the piece foreshadowed what Latvians call the singing revolution, which allowed Latvia with almost no bloodshed to declare independence in 1990 and actually regain it in 1991. So Vasks is said to have had to have sort of foreseen that in this piece. very interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this piece. And you get the full... what I like is Vasks is a composer who really uses all of the, what I like about orchestral music is you got this whole palette of sounds there. And so starting out with this beautiful alto flute, which gives you this tone. When I first heard it, I had to listen a few times to figure out. I knew it was a flute, but I said, this isn't a regular flute, And so I thought, well, this is some kind of lower flute. And then I saw in the notes that it was indeed an alto flute. So I said, well, that's really cool that he picked... That
you would start a piece with that instead of use it for a certain color in the middle of it.
And then he, chose an instrument that's not usually in the orchestration because he had this sound in mind. And then that cool bass clarinet coming through there. And I like how the woodwinds and brass are used in the themes in here. Also, the percussion gives a lot of added momentum to the piece. But there are also some really good sections with really powerful brass at some sort of real crescendo points. And so the whole palette of the orchestra is used really well. And then there's that point in sort of a little bit past halfway, I guess, where it actually develops into this kind of folk dance, and it's really dancing. And then after that, when the orchestra comes back more enlarged with the timpani, it sort of becomes this marching procession. So I felt like, I don't know, it's sort of, in my mind, it was sort of the folk countryside and then maybe sort of the modern government kind of contrast, or something greater that's in this kind of when it's over the timpani, it's sort of this full force thing in contrast with the more playfulness of the folk dance. And as you said, the quiet ending is something you're not quite expecting, but then in the end it's kind of fitting. And so as a tone sort of journey, it's interesting. The instruments are used really well, and then the contrasts and the dynamics in the piece are all really engaging. And so a well-constructed piece that's really enjoyable.
I really love this whole album, and I want to encourage listeners to hear it. Okay.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Who's afraid of contemporary music? Not adult music listeners, especially if you listen to these two albums by Pärt and Vasks. They're just fantastic. Give it a listen. Do yourself a favor. Make your week better than it's going to be.
That's right.
And listen to these two albums. They're really great. I mean, I was really floating all week long, like looking forward to talking about these, really.
Nothing scary here in
nothing
modern music, no.
Mm. In fact, contemporary music is a lot better than mid-20th century music. Although there's great mid-20th century music too, if which we're now starting to hear because it wasn't really played back then, except in its home country. All right, and the jazz stuff this week was really appealing as well.
All right, we're on to jazz, which is a trio of piano trios.
A trio of trios,
and these
that could be a good episode title. You want to do that?
We could do that. A trio of trios.
Okay.
Now this is a really good program. As I mentioned before, at the beginning of summer, I kind of was searching around for things. There was not really a lot of releases, and then we took a little bit of break over the summer, and there was sort of a burst of new releases that I collected from my sources. And so just to keep my mind straight of what I've got out there and get things out before they get too old, I started, putting them together in some sort of theme. And last week we had the Guitar Monks on a regular episode. Yeah. And so this week I had piano trios, and I had these three that I wanted to listen to.
Maybe and piano priests this week.
Piano priests, yeah, or something. Anyway, what order I should discuss them in, I wasn't sure, but I'm going to go with the accessibility theme. So we've got these two classical works, the Pärt and Vasks, that I think anyone can enjoy who likes classical music. And we're going to start with an album.
Or people who don't really, unless you hate classical music. I mean, you know.
And here we're going to start with an album that I think anyone can enjoy. As a matter of fact, I found out that this
Can I guess which one it's going to be?
Yeah, go ahead.
Joe Alterman.
Yeah. Actually, I found out that...
This is so appealing.
This album actually has presidential approval.
Really?
Yeah. And yes.
By which president?
See, that's also part of the appeal. That actually, they contacted Joe Biden, current president of the U.S., actually through his press secretary. What's this woman's name?
What's her name?
Psaki or something. Yeah,
Jen Psaki.
Yeah, and she usually doesn't like to answer any questions, but about this, they were quite open. And let's see, what is the quote? Joe Biden actually says, if you don't like Joe Alterman, you ain't a jazz fan.
He really said that? You got to be
right
kidding
here.
Me. Oh, stop.
Well, I was suspicious too. It's a bold statement. If you don't like Joe Alterman, you ain't a jazz fan.
Well, because it so recalls something else he said, so I'm having trouble believing this.
And so, I thought, this could be a partisan thing. So I looked over at what former President Trump had said about this artist too. And he is quoted as saying, Joe Alterman, great guy, great player. He swings bigly.
Now I know you're pulling my leg, man.
I'm pushing.
Because I know Donald Trump doesn't like music. Like, he likes Broadway show tunes, I've heard, and that's it. There was an interview. There was an interview with Penn and Teller. Who's the guy that talks? Penn, right?
Yeah, I think so.
He had met Trump, and he said he has no interest in music at all. He just has no appreciation of music. I don't know. I can't even imagine. Wouldn't have anything to talk about him with.
Do any presidents? Well, I guess.
Well, Richard Nixon played the piano and Clinton played the sax, right?
He played sax among playing other things, yeah. Anyway,
but they're both kind of villains, though. So
I thought that within those statements, there could be some album titles, but I thought if you don't buy this album, you ain't a jazz fan. That's a bit too negative. But then I thought, that's been done before, because there's the great Bill Evans album on Riverside, I think it is, and the notes by Orrin Keepnews, which is...
Just out of curiosity, where did you get those quotes from? Did you make them up, or did you actually see them in his notes or something?
I made them up.
Okay. Because I thought maybe it might have been his PR agent just making up stuff. Because on the back, I wrote a novel called Extreme Music, listeners, and on the back of that novel, there are... sort of blurbs about how great the book is, and I wrote all of them. They're not, they're not real. So
I was just going to put.
I thought maybe Alterman had done the same thing.
But no. Sorry, if Joe Alterman, if you're listening to this podcast, we apologize for that. But the album is that good. But I thought. If you don't buy this...
He does swing bigly, though.
If you don't buy this album, you ain't a jazz fan. That's kind of a negative statement, and I think it's already been done before with everyone digs Bill Evans, right? So that's a positive spin on it. That's been done. But I think in the future, he could have an album, like Joe Alterman swings bigly. That could be an album.
See, but just the word "bigly" would put off like half of the population of the 2% of people who listen to jazz anyway. So we're trying to
of jazz listeners.
We're trying to bump that up to 5%. So
anyway, if you don't know Joe Alterman, this is his latest release, "The Upside of Down," live at Birdland, which is on Ropeadope Records. Nice name. And he's a 32 years old pianist from Atlanta. He's also a NYU, New York University graduate, both BA and Masters in Jazz Piano. As a teen, Oscar Peterson was his hero, which you won't have any problem guessing when you listen to this album.
Yeah.
And he's also been following performances and played with the likes of Les McCann and Ramsey Lewis. Downbeat magazine calls his style rooted in the blues with a touch reminiscent of the great pianists of the 1950s, and that's for sure. There's not too many people playing the piano like this. Actually, there's sort of anti-swing kind of thing that has been going on.
And that's a real shame, because this is so immediately appealing.
And you're going to snap.
It's such fun.
You're going to snap back to all the things that were great about jazz piano on this album. So you've got Joe Alterman on piano, Nathaniel Schroeder on bass, and Marlon Patton on drums. And apparently Alterman said that he doesn't really prefer recording in a studio, and they had laid down recordings from some nights at Birdland, and he thought, well, let's just take those tracks and make an album. And he was pleased with the result, and I'm sure you will be too, because this is music that I think anyone can enjoy, whether you're a jazz fan or not. And so it's a collection of tunes that all really either swing, as in swinging with the jazz rhythm, or at least have infectious rhythms of various natures that will draw you in. And if you have a chance, check out Joe Alterman's playing style on YouTube. The technique he uses and the way he bends his knuckles and things while he's playing is really interesting. And he has almost like a spring-loaded hand technique that gives him this amazing rhythmic accuracy. And it's all put to an effect that brings good fun. So the album starts out with a tune called The Smudge, which is a tune that Oscar Peterson recorded, and he's swinging.
I thought it sounded familiar.
Yeah, right from the first right-hand tickling or tinkling of the ivories here. You're going to get that Peterson-style vibe. It's bluesy and swinging that borrows a lot from Peterson's style. It's got a cool walking bass solo in it, and you'll be off with a smile on your face right from there.
Not only that, he has a lot of really good ideas in his improvisations as well. Yeah. He's really quick and sort of witty as far as his improv goes.
Yeah. He doesn't run out of ideas, and this album doesn't really feature many bass or drum extended solos. It's all just him going off, and he doesn't run out of ideas. He keeps getting all these extended variations of rhythms and ideas, and it's all really fun, and the crowd really enjoys it. Track 2 is called Pretty Eyes, Pretty Smile. This is kind of a relaxed bossa ballad. You'll get the sense of the impressive accents in his playing and some really wonderful two-hand synchronized kind of lines and other work in this track. So he has really good technique, and the way he pulls out accents in lines keeps that rhythmic sense going, and that's a real feature of his playing. As you may guess from his name, Alterman, I presume he is Jewish. And 3, we get the tune Ose Shalom. It's kind of the Hebrew prayer, He Who Makes Peace. And this is a really cool and fun tune. It starts with this sort of Middle Eastern kind of vein with open fourths, but then that he turns into a really groovy blues romp from that figure. And so the tune, once it gets going, also has really nice chord turnarounds. And so you get this alternating sort of ominous theme, and then it sort of gets bluesy and goes through these nice chord changes. There's some really excellent funky bass work and a tight drum groove here, and that gives Alterman a lot of backing for some really soulful soloing. So this is a really cool tune, one of the standouts on the album for me. Number 4, jazz standard Time After Time, not the Cyndi Lauper tune, but
which is also really good. Which has also become a jazz standard.
Yeah,
now.
It's also become jazz. Anyway, this is a relaxed swing. He's got some really tight left-handed chords here, and an enticing break before he begins soloing. I love how this classic style of percussive playing with rolling figures and trills thrown in is picked up in his playing. And Alterman keeps it building. He never runs out of ideas, and there's some really great rolling figures to the end. This is sort of that old style of jazz piano, and he makes it fresh again here. Track 5, The First Night Home. This is kind of starts with a piano intro that leads into a slow ballad. And here you get some nice soft brushwork by Pärt on drums for added texture. And Alterman uses a lot of sweet sounds high on the keyboard, and he can still swing really well when he's slow and loose. He's got these kind of spring-loaded hands that are packed with these kind of rhythmic dynamite, no matter what he's playing. Track 6 is Pure Imagination, and this gets a funky opening figure that leads into a medium even beat on this tune. Some really nice funky syncopated bass lines also underneath, and when the funky figure keeps returning in the tune, it makes a nice contrast to the other sections. And here, Alterman's solo has some really amazing fast lines and sextuplet figures that he works in there. So he can play fast when he sees the opportunity for it, and his rhythm is still as precise as ever. Track 7, The Last Time I Saw You. This is a lovely intro, and it gains motion as the bass and drums join in with Alterman's solo piano. And here he shows that he knows how to treat a melody but still give it enough space while keeping things interesting. And Schroeder's bass gives a nice pulsing bottom to the swing that builds through the song. 8, Funny Girl, a tune you may know. This one is a strolling medium swing. And here, listen to Alterman's left hand on this tune, how it really drives the song along. That, in contrast to his high register tinkling in the right hand, and this is kind of the recipe that he mixes up here, and it really shows how much fun he's having. Number 9 is the title track, The Upside of Down. This one is a kind of funky, even beat groove, like a la Ramsey Lewis from the 60s or so. And it gets a little gospel-y, and Alterman uses a lot of super fast syncopated figures as he builds up his solo on this one. So another earlier style of piano that he enjoys, and you'll enjoy too. 10, the Henry Mancini tune, Days of Wine and Roses. Oscar Peterson also recorded this a few times on his albums. Alterman likes the chiming upper register on this one, and he plays a lot of repeated figures, and then he mixes it up through his solo. This gets usually this is played as kind of a ballad or a little fast ballad, but this is more groovy.
It's really upbeat. I said it's upbeat.
Yeah, this one gets a little more energy than you're used to hearing it.
He really does love those Days of Wine and Roses.
Yeah.
So he's not nostalgic. He's enthusiastic.
11 is Don't Forget to Love Yourself. This is a solo piano version of this ballad, and Alterman gets some space to explore kind of different rhythms and a little more legato playing, and he has some really beautiful runs that lead up to a nice climax, and that goes to the final tune called Gus Gus. Has a choppy piano opening. It gets into a driving swing over Schroeder's kind of chugging, walking bass. Alterman uses a little bit more dissonance than usual in this tune to build tension, and he has some playful lines as well. Schroeder gets one more of a rare bass solo on this album, and he almost seems surprised that he does.
There's a drum solo as well. Yeah.
And there's some tasty drum fills and some short solo phrases from Pärt while Alterman outlines the chords. So it's a really great sounding live recording too. I don't think it could have been done any better in the studio, and it wouldn't have the energy that this album has. It captures the spirit of all that was kind of swinging in piano up, into the 50s and 60s too, probably. And it will definitely put you in a good mood. I think even non-jazz fans will enjoy this. And if you put this on, your mom or the missus might even bring you a sandwich. I mean, I put this on one night and my wife brought the Knob Creek out without my asking.
Did she really?
Indeed, yeah. And she's usually great that way anyway, but
wow. I wrote at the bottom of my notes for this, is it okay to be as happy as Alterman makes us feel in 2021? Is this okay? Is this allowed? Because this is a really good feeling record.
Put this on for family therapy and everyone's going to have a good time. They'll take their masks off and just make sandwiches in Knob Creek, and everyone will
this
have
is
fun.
the way life should be. You should feel like this all the time. I want to say one thing about this record. I wasn't even a minute into this, and I was already looking for a CD of it to order. I really like this a lot right from the beginning. Now, the album is only available from his in physical format from his Bandcamp site. It's not on Amazon or anything like that, and that's fine. It was $12, and to ship it to Japan was $14. Oh, that kills me so much. Wow. This is the problem with Bandcamp. I mean, I really do appreciate that the artists want you to kind of like, support them and they get all the money for it. But you just get killed on these shipping rates. It's really horrible. Yeah. And then they give you the thing, $12, or, you get to fill in the amount you want to pay. And I would gladly give the artist a few more dollars, but not when they're charging me $14 to ship it here.
Oof, it's tough.
It was painful. I did get it, though, because I liked it a lot. So, anyway, $26 CD. Ugh, killing me.
Oof.
You're killing me.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway, it's not his fault anyway.
Not his fault. Well,
no.
Well, he did. Could be. I don't know. Maybe he's not signed to a major label. I don't know. But
it could be. Yeah.
I kind of wonder about his rhythm section though. They all like, oh, please, can we just have a solo here?
A solo.
I went to school for a lot of years. I want to play. I want to express myself.
He's just got so many ideas. Yeah.
Right. He does. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that one's going to put you in a good mood. And now we're going to shift gears with these next two albums and go into some different realms of piano, but I think they're really enjoyable. Maybe take a little bit more attention and exploration. And the first one is by the Olga Konkova Trio.
Oh, okay, good there.
Yeah, I'm going to go to this one first. And this is an album called Open Secret. This is on Losen Records. First time I've heard of this label, but there's a lot of new labels out there or things I haven't heard of. And this is going to feature the, I think she's listed as Norwegian Russian.
She's Russian. She was born in Russia, and she's married to the bass player.
Well, I'll get into that in a minute because that gives me another interesting thing I was just thinking about.
He's
to myself.
Norwegian, I think. So I think
it could be. Yeah,
so now she lives in Norway. Okay.
She was educated as a classical pianist in Moscow, and later she studied jazz at Berklee College of Music in Boston, and that's where she met her husband. But here on this album, Konkova is on piano and also an interesting incorporation of Fender Rhodes piano, which we'll talk about. Yeah. On bass, Per Matheson, her husband, who she met while she was studying at Berklee. And then on drums, Gary Husband, a name you may be familiar with. He's recorded, I think, a lot in the UK. And
I find it ironic that her husband's in the band, but the guy that's named
that's what I wanted to say. So
I stole your joke. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because Per Matheson is her husband, but Gary Husband is not her husband. So when we talk
it's kind of like ZZ Top.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So
ZZ
Top
you say it. Go ahead.
Was Billy Gibbons, Dusty Hill, Dusty Hill passed away just recently, and so among their other things they were noted for, their blues shuffle rhythms in rock music and a lot of cool tunes. The drummer was Frank Beard, who had no beard.
Yeah, he was the only guy in the band without a beard.
Didn't have a beard, So it started to make me think this could be like a music trio paradox kind of thing going on, where the husband is the one,
who doesn't have the name husband,
not married, and the bearded, the unbearded. Anyway, well, we're not
before we go down that.
When we speak about husband, we'll be talking about Gary Husband and not Matheson, although at least now he's her husband or something like that. But anyway, so this album is something very different in mood that contrasts with what we heard with Alterman, but gives us something new to explore here. It starts out with a tune called Hymn for My Brother, and this one has a really gentle melody, almost like a pop-like sensibility to the way that it moves. Konkova introduces it with a lot of space over her husband's nice brushwork on the drums. And Matheson is very much in sync with her, adding bass pulses at just the right spots that push the melody forward. And then Konkova plays some sparse improvisation in spots. But overall, this tune shows that this group's playing is about space and texture, which is setting the theme for what you're going to hear on this whole recording, and right down to the fading kind of ascending notes at the end. I think Konkova expresses her ideas when there's a lot of room and not too much other sound going on, and she works well with texture and sort of ideas that need breathing room to work through them. And the way she locks in, naturally, with her partner, Matheson, on bass, it seems really sort of symbiotic, and a husband on drums seems to fit into that without overplaying and just adding the right amount of extra to that. 2 on the track list is Love to Be 4. Here, husband whacks us in on the drums just before the heavy low piano chords begin. And here Konkova builds up with lots of kind of open chiming chords, and then the drums generate a lot of energy all over the kit. The drums then sort of burn out, but the chords continue more quickly with light textures of bass and cymbals. And this one's a kind of a different mood overall that's created on this piece. Track 3 is called All Sorts of Weird and Wonderful. And here, this is kind of an interesting point on this album. Konkova introduces an open-sounding theme on piano, and then there's a line of roads that's interspersed. So you get kind of piano roads and then back to piano. And she's playing very rubato, loosely rhythm kind of playing until the cymbals come in and begin to set a slow pace. Then kind of magically the roads return, and then almost sounding like a vibraphone in the sustaining kind of quality to it. Matheson takes some melodic lines with clear articulation and bass sliding, with a really nice tone on his bass.
Yeah,
and still,
he's a beautiful sound.
There's a lot of space in this composition. Konkova returns with a piano, acoustic piano, and solos with some nicely melodic lines. And again, there's a Rhodes answer just at one point. So it's interesting how she heard both of the keyboard instruments. There's not a lot of Rhodes in here, but she definitely wanted to include it in the sound of how she saw that, which is not something we usually hear. We do hear Rhodes being used more these days, but some artists will just choose to use it for a whole album or a tune, but not in concert with the piano, and certainly to a relegated role like this. So it becomes like just another kind of tonal part of the...
I gotta say, after so many years, it's lost its Lionel Richie association, I think. I kind of, you just heard it in every song at one point. Yeah. Number 4 is Rest in Motion. This is a riff of alternating phrases shared by piano and bass over some nicely textured drumming. And then Konkova reaches a nice solo of lines that rise and fall that she weaves together. Matheson gets a spot here to include some more melodic lines, and then the riff returns as an idea, but with different notes. Another kind of interesting composition. 5, Darwin's Point. This is a hypnotic syncopated riff that changes modes, so it kind of keeps you expecting something. And that sets up some nice harmonic possibilities in the ascending hook that Konkova starts exploring, while she keeps things really rhythmic. She gets more adventurous with some faster figures here
did in the other tracks. And Matheson has a short solo. And then Husband adds some cool snare sounds, building into a drum flurry over the repeated chords. Track 6 is called No Rules. And this has an interesting piano opening with a lot of things going on. There's a nice modulation when the drums and bass kick in to start to swing this tune. And Konkova mixes in a few bluesy ideas and then more abstract phrases. There's like a pregnant pause midway through that leads to a blazing tempo that's set up by the bass and drums. And then Konkova joins back in and things spin out while the beat dissolves into a kind of final piano crash. This one's a really interesting tune. It kept me guessing at what was going to go on at each stage of it. 7, this is kind of a scary tune, The Man with the Van. I don't know what he's doing, but this one has a repeating sort of staid Rhodes riff that transfixes you at the start, and then it gets layered with more piano on top of that. The bass lays the groove with some cracking drumming, and then Konkova has a piano and Rhodes dialogue with herself in this one. And things change textures and then wind down before the riff returns.
You know, the word I used for this particular tune is neurotic. Kind of reminded me of,
right.
Yeah.
8, we've got a French title. How do you say this?
Les Hommes de Sable, which means like the man of the sands.
The Sandman, yeah. Here, Konkova is on Rhodes over a pulsing beat on the drums. The tune is based on a 3-note moving pattern and the kind of implied harmonies that those tones suggest. Matheson gets some interesting bass sounds in the background on this one. 9 is called Open Secret, and you get some low left-hand tones with right-hand chords that start a nice rubato introduction and some interesting rubbing bass tones under that. There's a break, and a slow tempo is set by Husband's brushwork. The piano plays some melodic ideas and passes it off to the bass for a while. And the tune has a very breath-like nature. I thought this was a really lovely, gentle kind of playing here. It shows a lot of restraint and following kind of relaxation, almost meditative breath quality to it.
I remember the bass solo in this one. I thought it was really nice. Yeah.
10, Grande Capitano.
Which seems Italian, huh?
It sounds like it. Yeah. It's got a syncopated piano chord opening that gives way to a steady drum beat and a bass line. And then Konkova adds some Rhodes here. She solos sparsely on piano and adds Rhodes underneath and then sort of switches the piano and Rhodes parts. Matheson finds a digging bass groove, and that's accented on the drums with cymbals. And then the piano gets energized with some runs and trills, some high choppy chords before things quiet down again. And Matheson takes over the kind of melodic side with a bass solo, and he incorporates some real speedy 16th note runs in here. And there's also a space for some fine drum work between a low note riff figure in the piano and bass. Number 11 is Discovering the Truth. And this is a slow and halting piano intro for about 2 minutes. Then finally, cymbals and bass join in. It's a very slow tempo. And here, Konkova weaves kind of textured ideas with rhythmic freedom over the top. The bass and drums disappear again, and they only return faintly as the piano does some more weaving to bring the tune to an end. And the last tune, number 12, Triste Realidad. And this is like a slightly sad, fitting melody for the title. It hints at a Latin rhythm that doesn't quite develop because it's very free in its pacing. But after a pause at a minute or so, a more even rhythm emerges that's kind of accentuated by repeated piano notes, and Matheson has some melodic bass spots. The rhythm returns to that of the previous section as they bring it to an end. So I enjoyed this album a lot. I liked listening to it. It's fresh-sounding music, and it sort of breathes as they're playing it. It requires all this space that allows you to hear all of the parts to it, and I thought it takes a lot of, integration and understanding between the players to play something with this much openness to it without overplaying and valuing the textures of each instrument. And also was really intrigued and sort of mystified by Konkova's use of the Rhodes in here, in the way that she uses it as almost as an accessory to the piano. But she definitely has a reason for wanting to hear it on those certain lines. So she's not a huge technical player, but she's very much a sort of a tonal creator, and
she sort of places the tones in spaces that she
places the tones, and the compositions are interesting, and it's a music with a peaceful quality that draws you into it, and you sort of join this space yourself because there's so much room to swim around in it. So I was intrigued, and I thought it was unique and well worth a listen.
Yeah, I want to remark on how beautifully recorded this album was. I really liked the whole sound of it, especially the sound of the bass is really rich. He gets almost this liquidy sound that I really enjoyed. It might just be his sound. Also, when the bass plays with the piano, they really are like one person. I guess it's not surprising that they're husband and wife, because they really do seem to sort of mind meld on what they do. I really enjoyed the sound quality of this album. Now, when I listened to this, I'm going to warn listeners against this. I made the mistake of listening to this right after the Joe Alterman album. It's kind of a come down from that, so I would isolate this and listen to it on your own. I did get into it after a while, though, as my mood eventually changed, but I enjoyed this. Yeah, it was spacious. It was sort of ruminative. It kind of gave you it gave a lot of space for contemplation, I thought. I liked it a lot.
This is in the vein of, as we heard last week in the Guitar Monks, the Andris Cyril album. Which was all about, spacious sort of room to create a kind of a picture.
That was a lot more abstract than this is.
Yeah, it was more abstract, but I think it's the same kind of approach rather than rhythm-driven. Especially that was surprising because as a drummer, as a leader, you need to get into that
you wouldn't
space.
Think you'd go there.
But similar kind of approach here. There's a lot of rhythmic things going on, but overall, it's sort of a tonal palette and a bigger composition of things with a lot of space to work out their beauty. All right, and the third album. And I've saved this for last because this one, I think, is some pianist who I think is going to have a lot of promise for the future. And this is the Billy Test Trio, Coming Down Roses on the Aveni Test Music label. And this is young Pennsylvania native Billy Test, who has held the piano chair with the Grammy Award-winning WDR Big Band out of Germany since 2018. And that's working with Bob Mintzer in this band. And so he's appeared on a lot of the WDR band recordings and television broadcasts over Europe. And here he's exclusively on piano, but you can see on YouTube some recordings where he also plays a very mean Hammond organ. So maybe in the future we'll see him do some Hammond work. But this is his first recording debut as a leader.
I want to point out the title, by the way. It's a play on Everything Is Coming Up Roses. He called it Coming Down Roses,
Coming Down
which I thought
Roses,
was kind of odd. Yeah. I wonder what he means by that.
Anyway, Test is alumni of William Patterson University, and he studied under Mulgrew Miller there. And you can see he's been a finalist in some piano competitions over the years, and some of those recordings are available on YouTube, and you'll see his energy. Anyway, here he is as his debut as a leader, as I mentioned, with Evan Gregor on bass and Ian Froman on drums. And this album features a lot of his original compositions too, as well as one standard and a sort of reworked number, and then a number their cover tune that we'll get to in a moment. But the album starts out with a lesser played standard by Cole Porter, All of You, and this one gets reimagined harmonically in a lot of ways to get some more freedom out of it. It starts out with a nice groove with the piano left hand and bass, getting it into a medium swing. Then Test takes some freedom with the harmonies and the rhythm also as he gets started soloing. He works up to some real rhythmic chiming chords and real blazing runs. Then he works in a cycle of ascending figures that break the rhythm. But when he sort of comes back to the tempo of the song, you'll notice that the bass and drums are in perfect sync with him here. So this trio plays really well together. They're in sync with each other. Things quiet down for a Gregor bass solo. There's a lot more bass solos on this one than there are on the Joe Alterman album. After they return to the melody, Test works in some really huge, cool chord clusters. These giant chords that build tension to the end. So
he's a very generous leader.
Yes, yeah,
Test,
everyone gets a spot to shine. But you get an idea of his approach working a sort of well-known tune, but he really gets it expanded here. Number 2 is his first original, Spinning. This one starts with a gentle unison bass and piano melody, and it adds some more piano chords over that as the sort of waltzing melody goes on. And it also breaks up the waltz with kind of triplet figures that keep the rhythm really interesting. Here you get a sense of Test's sense of touch. He has a really good articulation that he can vary to the mood. Gregor gets another bass solo here, and his tone is rich in the upper register. And Test's solo also keeps the lighter touch for the mood, but it includes a lot of chiming pretty chords, so a little softer aspect of his personality here. 3, another original, Fate. This is very melodic at a relaxed tempo. Test has a really pretty solo here with some intervals in his playing and some kind of harp-like runs that he draws up the keyboard, and chords that all have a very sustaining quality. He builds it up and takes it out in a very composed way, so it's a nicely structured solo. They return to the melody, and after some more piano ideas, the bass and drums drop out, and for Test to create a more free and pretty statement before the ending. 4 is called Hardly. Actually, in the album notes, it's described as a contrafact on Softly as a Morning Sunrise, but you'll hardly recognize it because it's really distilled down to the real elements of that. Froman comes in on a doubled up groove that here working on the drums. Test starts getting busy, and then it shifts into a driving swing with the bass and drums. Here, Test really romps through the modulating harmonies with speedy runs, complex percussive figures, and heavy chords. He gets some cross rhythms going in his hands. It's a really intense solo. Froman has a busy drum solo, keeps the energy high. When Test returns, he doesn't let the energy down at all, and he has some more fast runs and harmonic ideas until they decide to kind of fade the tune out mysteriously. So cool high energy tune. 5 is called Empty Spaces. This is just a solo piano piece Really pretty chords, and this one has a nice melody that shows off Test's delicate sense of touch. There's a nice variety in dynamics too, and Test builds to the climaxes in the tune in the different sections, and he releases them gently. So this shows off his sort of softer side and the subtleties in his playing. 6 is the title track, Coming Down Roses. Here the bass sets an engaging bounce for the tune. Test works with lines of clear notes in the right hand before adding in more chords and then rhythmic figures as he becomes more intense. This is also a really nicely built solo here. Gregor gets another melodic bass solo, and Test switches to accompaniment mode, and he has a nice, precise, but quiet chord backing. Frohman gets a chance for some drum intensity over the repeated figures in the final section, and then it goes quiet to the end. 7. This is a tune called The Prince by a lesser-known pianist, John Coates Jr., who was an early influence on Keith Jarrett's playing, and also someone who Test is a fan of. This one starts with an extended solo bass intro that has these slides, and then it finally slides into this ostinato pattern that becomes like a root for the tune, and cymbals join in, and Test has some light chiming over that. His ideas and intensity expand with rhythmic figures as the tune swells, and then things get quiet towards the end, but they keep the atmosphere set in the earlier part of the tune.
This particular piece, by the way, The Prince, it had a classical sense of arriving at the tonic chord as opposed to ending on the root chord. You know? I had the sense that there was a progression being played out, sort of. Yeah, and I think the bass sort of feeds into that with that kind of. It's like an ostinato thing. It's almost like a one note, but it has that that goes through it, and then it varies, but it always comes back to that. So it sort of leads you back to that kind of thing. Yeah, and I know I wrote that Empty Spaces had that quality too. So there's almost like a classical sense to those two. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. I guess the Empty Spaces is something he wrote for the anniversary of his father's death or something too. So it has some special meaning to him. I thought, that one, the climaxes he builds up in that are particularly moving. I thought. 8. This is the best title of the evening. Mother's Day with Freud. Oh boy. I don't know what that quite means, but hope you don't have a mom that's in therapy or something. But this one starts with a cool bass and drum syncopation that make a setting for some disconnected piano lines that keep things moving ahead. It sort of creates a little bit of uneasiness, but the rhythm develops into a new groove, and it opens up for a place for Test to really jam out freely. And he goes all out on this one. Really awesome piano solo. Gregor takes a rhythmic bass solo again that's filled with some jumping intervals. And Frohman also gets a section to bust out some nice rhythms. And then Test takes it out with some intervals that need therapy on their own. So they're just having some fun with this title. Kind of a fun exploration here. 9, Belonging. This is a final tune. It's a solo piano introduction that brings us a kind of pretty and contemplative theme that has some nice pauses in it. The bass and drums join in at a very slow tempo, and Test shows his gentle touch here, and Frohman matches with soft brushwork on the drums, in the snare and cymbals. The dynamics swell in the tune as it goes on, but Test keeps it kind of lush sounding, and Gregor gets another bass spot here, and he keeps it warm to match the mood. So I really enjoyed this album. I think Test shows huge promise. He's a young guy with a lot of talent. It's a fine debut. He has gobs of technique,
but also a nice touch that he can show on the softer moods. And he can really build up a solo when he wants to get that climax. His compositions show a nice variety of material, and he's got a trio here that works well with him. They lock into each other, and he's also, as Mike said, a generous leader. He gives Gregor and Froman their own spots to shine here. So it's definitely a young player I'm going to be looking forward to hearing more of with whatever he does next.
Yeah, another thing he does is he plays to serve the song, not to draw attention to himself.
Right.
Or to wow the audience. And you can kind of see that sort of generosity plays out in his giving the other two players a lot of solos.
Yeah.
And he winds up wowing the audience anyway, despite not doing that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very appealing I have here. He's very unassuming as a pianist, and yet he draws your attention. It's sort of mysterious. I really liked that quality of his.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a classical sort of approach in some of these tunes, too, that kind of struck me, that, arriving... a sense of arriving that you get in classical music a lot, but not necessarily in jazz or like a more popular form.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I like the way he builds his solos, and and for a young player, you can look through the history of jazz, and as you see players coming up, a lot of players who had like really good technique and also sort of in emotional sense, when they were young, they would sort of go all out on every tune and every solo, and they would sort of wear you out. But he has a, kind of a mature restraint, and there's just like those two tunes that I mentioned where he really does go all out, and then so he holds enough back for when he realizes, okay, this needs more, and it's sort of, he has that kind of, normally this is sort of like a audiophile kind of, but we say, headroom. He's got that, he keeps that extra like 3 decibels there, and when he only uses it when he needs it. And so when he builds up that solo and he still feels like he's got more, he goes there without distorting any of his ideas or getting gratuitous about it. But he can still sort of add some more on there with the turbo boost kind of thing. And I like that kind of quality about his playing. So it gets a really great intensity. And then he doesn't sort of just, blow his musical load and drop there. He also sort of brings his solos back down into the next segment. So I found that sort of maturity of the arc of a solos really interesting in his playing. He's obviously listened to, the great players and followed their sort of mature arc of soloing. So I liked that combined with the energy, and I thought, for a debut album, this one has a lot of promise to it.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing what else he's going to do. The beginning of a great career, perhaps.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope anyway. He sounds great.
So here you've got 3 trios. I think all of them are really intriguing in their own right. You've got the, how can I say, the complete likability and grooviness of Joe Alterman. You're going to like this album. And everyone in your family is going to like it too. You've got the
think about, like, last week we talked about Pat Metheny's live record, and that was just this big free flight of joy. This is kind of a good companion to that, even though it's not the same kind of music. This is really more of a traditional swing, but it's still that uplifting sort of vibe to it. It's just fantastic. All right. You'd actually, if you want to get back at all the misery that we've had in 2020 and 2021, you can just easily do that by listening to that album.
Yeah, just put on Joe Alterman.
Defy the times.
Yeah, you'll be happy. And you've got this introspective Olga Konkova trio, which has this is also, it's very complex in the ideas, but the music has so much space in it. While you're listening to it, you actually get time to digest what you've heard, and it's a beautiful recording, lots of space in it, and she gives you time to sort of follow the picture that she's painting as she goes along. So this one deserves a listen, and it's really nice too. And then right here, more in the mainstream modern sort of vein, Billy Test, and you'll be, I think, impressed by not only his technique, but his creativity, the energy he brings to it, and then the nice balance in his well-integrated trio with some mix of nice material, both original and sort of reinvented standards and other things here. So, yeah, there's enough piano here to give you your keyboard fix in the jazz world. Yeah,
and there's enough podcast here to keep people listening for 2 weeks, because I think this might be our longest podcast ever.
Yeah, it might be.
We just kept talking. But well, how can we not?
How can you not? When you have such good music.
Such interesting music, you just want to keep talking about it.
Maybe we'll have a week where we pick a bunch of duds that we had hoped would be good, and then they turn out to not be good.
This was okay. Next.
Next, yeah.
Be done in 10 minutes.
We'll see. Anyway, I think everything here. I think this podcast might have the best total grouping of things to listen to. Maybe
that's possible. One of them, anyway.
Yeah, but anyway, listen to these recordings. I'm going to listen to all of them again, because everything.
Yeah, we highly recommend all of them.
Really, really good. Yeah. And so that's a wrap for episode 32 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. And in this case, I think even your friends and family who are less mature will develop from listening to this music, so you can introduce it to them as well. So as always, please do like, subscribe, leave a comment on whatever platform or service you listen to us on. And if you'd like to contact us directly, please reach us at email at adultmusicpodcast, all one word, at gmail.com. And that's it for this week. And we'll be back again next week with 6 new albums. And both Mike and I have a lot of stuff.
We do. Keep listening, everybody. It's a good time to be a music fan.
Check out the playlists, and we'll see you again next week.